Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the PrizePicks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pod Mavericks After Dark. This is Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe. We are recording here, though we're also going live. It is Tuesday, April 18th. A year ago today, we were in the NBA playoffs, but not today. Josh, how are you?
I would say, yeah, I'm good. I think we're both trying to adjust to being available.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. Like, neither one of us, like, we're kind of at the point right now where we care, but we also don't care to a degree because there's not enough to talk about in terms of like regular day-to-day stuff to where when I get out of the habit, I don't get back into it. Like, I'm enjoying going to sleep. Which, well, I'm trying to enjoy going to sleep. My dogs seem to be really against the entire proposition of me sleeping. But you know, watching a little playoff stuff and then not having to have stakes in it at the moment is actually quite nice. I'm following every series. I did not watch this Knicks game at all tonight, which was which is probably a good call. Mm-hmm. But have you been watching any of the playoffs?
Yeah, here and there, you know. I don't think it would have been good form at the household to be like, hey, there's no Mavericks playoffs, so you know I'm free, and then,
right.
Sit at home and watch teams that aren't even related to the Mavericks.
The fourth quarters of some of these games have been worth like clicking over for.
Oh yeah, like, I've been watching. I watched both Kings games. I watched most of the game one of the Clippers game. Watched bits and pieces of some of the other game ones as well. Watched the end of the Knicks Cavs game one. Caught bits and pieces of the Celtics and Knicks games tonight. But yeah, they've been some pretty entertaining games so far for sure.
And it's really, you know, there's enough series going on to where I want to root for all of the teams involved to lose. Like I was explaining to a number of my California friends, it's like I haven't cared about the Kings in 15 years, so I can't hate them. So watching them succeed against the Warriors is really, it's quite nice. Now, as we all know, any team, you know, has sort of the Cinderella run, and then they can become the villains pretty quickly. But, you know, watching the Grizzlies fail against the Lakers was, you know, you don't want to see, anytime you see a guy like John Morant get hurt, that sucks. But also like seeing Dylan Brooks not be able to succeed, I enjoy that. Like there's
that series is like the Alonzo Mourning gift for you, the Lakers.
And like then there's the crazy Clippers and Phoenix series where I can't stand Westbrook. I can't stand Devin Booker. And yet Westbrook blocking Booker the other night and then Booker's whining has been really like, it brings like seeing him suffer. I don't mind it because Booker, in my opinion, is one of these. He's the superstar who gets the most passes, I think, from people because he's so skilled. He's not a huge guy, but he does. I don't know. His whining face. Luka gets so much grief for whining, as he should. But Booker is he's just low key, really, really easy to hate on.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's that video of the workout over the summer, right? Where he was complaining about being like, I don't think it's hard to come back from that. Like if once everyone saw that, I was like, oh, okay. If you weren't like a Suns fan, it was pretty funny. But yeah, it's been pretty cool to watch games that aren't the Mavericks and not have that existential cloud of dread hanging over us. But this is also the first time we've talked since the season ended. So
we've actually had a fair amount of stuff happen. You know, we did not talk. So Nico Harrison gave a long, lengthy press conference. I talked about that in a live show last week. You and I didn't get a chance to talk about that. Did anything really? Let's kind of start there, and then we'll work our way up through the news.
Yeah, nothing really jumped out to me because I really try to not, like, in general, you should not put too much stock in the public comments of a front office executive, and then you like double it for the Mavericks because like Nico's not even the guy that's going to be making a lot of these decisions. Like I saw a bunch of people get mad that he backed Jason Kidd, and I was like, guys, first off, he's not going to fire him in a press conference, and two, he's not even the one that can do it. Yep. So, like, that's up to Cuban if Kidd is going to be coach next season. So, it's a much ado about nothing. Like, I try not to let that stuff. I try not to get too emotional about that stuff. The two things I thought were interesting. One, basically the same things that he said that they needed were literally copy and paste from his exit interview in 2021. In terms of things that the team needed. So I thought that was just kind of funny. And then I think the second thing that I liked that he said was, I think someone kind of asked him about like the fans' frustrations with this season and the organization, and he didn't run away from that question.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that he was like, yeah, they should be frustrated because we're frustrated. So it's one of the first times I've heard someone important with the Mavericks or involved with the Mavericks kind of admit some fault and not blame. Usually when the Mavericks, when people publicly related to the Mavericks have a chance to skewer Mavs fans in public, that's been the trend lately, whether it's Cuban talking about Twitter people and the uniform rebrand, or, commentators that work for the team kind of dissing segments of the fan base. So I appreciated that he was just kind of straight up and like, yeah, they should be mad because we failed. So, and even Cuban, even though his comments weren't great, that's still the most that he's ever admitted fault, I think, in a long time. So I wonder if this is going to be a more roller coaster off season than maybe we thought, because we kind of considered, well, they can't really do much, so what's going to happen? But I don't know. I wonder if they're gonna shake things up maybe more than we think.
Yeah, and that was kind of, and then it was quiet for a couple of days, and then we eventually got the news about the Mavericks getting fined $750,000 for tanking. Now, they were fined $600,000 in 2018 for a much more egregious thing, where Mark Cuban went on a podcast and talked about like the strategic, thinking and why they should tank, and he was right, but again, it's like for the reason they were fined is not because they tanked. It's because they said the quiet part loud. And anyone that argues otherwise is being obtuse, and I'm not really interested in the conversation. I have had so many people in my life, not like, you have two kinds of people that didn't understand why they were fined, and then people that really thought the Mavericks and like go down swinging, really thinking the Mavericks should have fought this out. And that's not how the incentive structure works. And all these people, I have some smart basketball friends. I talked to a lot of national people who said, well, Luka's gonna remember this. Luka's gonna remember that they did this. So that's really bad. Well, if they had went into the play-in or like played it out and then got the 11th seed, Luka's not going to fucking remember that they like, oh, we don't have any way to make the team better, but hey, remember when we gave it the old college try and still didn't make the play-in? Or if they did make the play-in and only to get like swatted, which there's just no good outcome. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I know that the play-in is like the NBA's baby because it is fun, though it's really confusing. It's a fun process. But it's the Mavericks got fired because Jason Kidd said a thing out loud. Mark Cuban probably would have said a thing out loud had Jason Kidd not done it. And it's a matter of course. They should have gotten fined for being stupid. They weren't going to lose their draft pick. The NBA is not like that. There's just no, like, every sport does this. Like I've been listening to football podcasts where it's just like, okay, well, this team has no incentive to win. Like it's just, unless you flatten the lottery odds completely, you're going to get tanked.
Yeah, or you get rid of the draft, which is also not happening.
Right. Sure.
What's really funny though, like talking about like how, to bounce off your point about how Luka's going to remember this, it's like they probably kept up the fight longer than they should have. I mean,
well,
you could argue that after those 2 Charlotte losses, I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelash if they were like, okay, that's it, because everyone basically knew the season was over after those 2 Charlotte losses. Like emotionally, we kind of felt like the team was cooked, even if they were mathematically still in it, and they kept trying. So it's like, it's funny, like, and as they were trying, Portland and Utah and a bunch of other teams packed it in. So like the fact that they rode it out as long as they did, I mean, kind of, I think goes against some of these points people are making about how embarrassing it is for them to give up. Like, it's just weird to me. Like, it's 2 games and they didn't control their own destiny, and Oklahoma City won. So they weren't making the play-in. Like, it wasn't happening. There's no there's no what if. They weren't going to make it.
There was a report by my friend Kevin O'Connor on FanDuel TV where he said that he had been told that the Mavericks had discussions about tanking in late March and that Kyrie and Luka were not interested in it. And so they kept playing hard. But here's the thing. Let's just go through the schedule, team. On Friday, March 17th, the Mavericks beat the Lakers on Maxi Kleber's whirlwind 3-point shot. The Mavericks would go on to win 2 more games the rest of the season. 1 against the Pacers, 1 against the Kings. So whether or not they entertain tanking ultimately doesn't matter because they lost anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that, like, there are all sorts of people, Kevin doesn't know what he's talking about, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm not really interested in the veracity of Kevin's reporting in this instance. The Mavericks sucked. They lost.
Yeah.
Sorry. So
they had plenty of chances to make those final 2 games matter if they wanted them to. So, like we said, they lost those 2. We knew the season was over when they lost those 2 Charlotte games. So, anyone that wants to cry wolf now is just, it's just being pedantic, I think.
Then that's correct. Then we had one more piece of news which happened yesterday. Mark Stein, and you wrote this up, so you're probably the better one to talk about it. Mark Stein put out a piece that the Mavericks are on the cusp of hiring former Utah Jazz general manager Dennis Lindsay. So why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so it looks like he's going to come into the front office as a consultant to Nico Harrison. That's according to Stein. He was the GM of the Jazz from 2012 to 2021. In June of 2021, he transitioned into an advisory role. Coincidentally, that came after the Jazz lost in the second round after having the most wins in the NBA in the 2020-2021 season. They were 52-20, and you remember the league only played 72 games, so they were, it's 52 wins, but they were, that's like a 60-plus win team if you would have equated that win percentage to 82 games. So they were really good, lost in the second round. They never made the conference finals while Lindsay was GM, despite the fact that they were consistently a top 4 team in the West, for most of his rule. So after that flame out in the playoffs, he transitioned to an advisory role. Also, probably didn't help that earlier in 2021, a former player accused him of racist remarks that the league investigated and said they couldn't find any evidence that it happened. And Lindsay, of course, denied it. And Quinn Snyder, who was supposed to be in the conversation as well, said he didn't remember it either. So I have to imagine that story combined with the playoff results, they were probably ready to move on. So they just didn't need any more reasons. He's in terms of just judging his basketball work, he's interesting because he did build those Jazz teams that were pretty good. He drafted Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, and He made those teams that, Joe Ingles and training for Mike Conley. But if you talk to some Jazz fans, he also had a lot of misses in the draft after they drafted Mitchell. I can't remember who their pick in 2020 was, but apparently they had him really high on their board, and he doesn't play their 2020 draft pick. And he signed Rudy Gobert to that crazy long contract. They traded a lot of assets to get Conley, and they still couldn't get over the hump. So he's kind of got a mixed bag in terms of his GM resume. Before he was with the Jazz, he was an assistant GM from 2007 to 2012. So assistant GM with the Spurs. So being part of the Spurs front office from 2007 to 2012, where the Spurs, I think, won they won at least 2 titles, if I'm remembering off the top of my head.
Yep.
So talking to some Jazz blogger, seeing some Jazz bloggers react to this news, a lot of them think that he gets a lot of rope because he was part of the Spurs organization when they were really, really good.
Sure.
So
we're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I love about Indeed is it makes hiring all in one place so easy and streamlined so I can spend more time on the rest of my business. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Who knows? He's his track record as GM with the Jazz last 5 years is better than the Mavericks front office track record the last 5 or 6 years. So I don't know. I mean, it could help Nico. He's a consultant. At the end of the day, it's hard for me to care because we know the structure of this front office. So it's maybe he helps with some cap space, some more intricate, detailed things that Cuban's not going to necessarily pay attention to. But otherwise, I just don't see this as moving the needle one way or another, other than the fact that they're hey, we have to change something.
See, and I'm not sure what change something means, because one of the things before, so the previous regime, Donnie Nelson was obviously GM for a very long time, but Haralabos Voulgaris was at first an unofficial advisor and then became anything from a shadow GM to a person that was essentially that Mark Cuban's little finger. I don't know really what we want to call him. One of the things that I think our fan base doesn't entirely understand, because it has been this way for such a long time, is that when it comes to decision-making processes, Mark Cuban is the most involved owner by a wide margin. Wide margin. He is involved in everything that they do. And that makes these sorts of hires difficult to ascertain, because at the end of the day, they do what Cuban wants. Whereas with, let's just say, the Heat and Mickey Erickson, I think that's the last name, Harrison, the guy who owns all the cruise lines, team officials, the GM basically runs things and gets the blessing of the owner. I'm going to do this, for example. I don't know, depending on what your work situation is like, you might have the kind of manager who you tell, they let you operate, and then they'll correct you from time to time or tell you what they want differently. But most GMs are most team runners are team owners are not intimately involved in the decision making.
They're the money men.
Yes. And so it's hard because, Lindsay could be the greatest, smartest guy in the world, and it would not matter if he and Cuban don't see eye to eye. And that is what makes some of this stuff so difficult, because Mark has to wear all of the decisions at the end of the day. That's why he got so frustrated about the Rick Brunson thing and fired his mouth off and those sorts of things, because he knows it. He knows it. And it sort of defangs everyone else in the organization, whether it's Michael Finley, Nico Harrison, Jason Kidd, the cap guy, whoever. Mark is the guy that has to deal with all of this, both the consequences and the accolades. And I wonder how, I think when he was involved in the organization in the 2000s, this was his main thing. He loved doing it. And frankly, the rules were different. And so he was able to spend and do more. And now I'm just not sure how much it matters whether Lindsay comes in and wants to assist with certain things, because number one, Mark exists and will be the final decision-making man. And number two, they just don't have a lot of options.
Yeah. Maybe he helps with some of the smaller moves, I don't know. He's a consultant.
Does he help them?
He doesn't technically, if he's a consultant, he doesn't have any power. Like, he's literally just a guy there to bounce ideas off of. So, I wouldn't really expect much influence one way or the other, even if Cuban wasn't there. So, there's only so much they could do. But right. Part of me thinks is like putting lipstick on a pig. Like, are they just trying to publicly be like, hey, look, we're shaking things up because this was so bad. And this is the most heat they've had on them as an organization since, I guess maybe like after they flamed out against the Warriors in 2007.
I think so, because 2008 to 2010, the Mavericks were kind of a quiet afterthought.
Yeah.
Right. The internet wasn't like how it was today. Dirk was kind of in his, okay, well, I guess this guy's just going to toil in obscurity. They're going to win 50 games, but not be able to do much. That was sort of where they were. And, if I had a wish for Lindsay, it would be the difference in, one of the things that I think is a fixable problem with the Mavericks, like immediately, is they have to care about roster spots 10 through 15.
Yep.
They just have to. There's no more of this. You're going to take swings and misses. Okay. But Frank Ntilikina was not an answer. And we knew that coming into the year. And yet they insisted he would be part of the rotation. That's not on Frank. That's him. Or that's Cuban. That's all of them. So it's, if we could just correct that and provide some padded depth, then I think the Mavericks are going to be a little better next year. Cause I like to kind of wish cast what I think is going to happen. The most likely outcome, and as I see it, is they keep their 10th pick because they have an 80% chance of that, of staying in the top 10. And then I think they re-sign Kyrie Irving to like a 4-year deal that's more than we want to pay, but it's less than he wants to make. It's like a happy medium. And then they come into the season and they've padded the roster with either, they move off that pick, or they draft somebody that can play right away. And I do think there are guys that can do this. We'll talk about that much more down the line as we get later in the summer. But I just think if you could do that, the Mavericks could win. They had a lot of bad bounces this year. They were within range. Like, they could have won 5 more games just on the bounces. So,
all right. Yeah. It just depends on how much they want to, mix things up, because they can't, they don't have a lot of assets and they don't have a lot of cap room, but like, the 10th pick, if they keep the 10th pick, plus they can trade 2027 this summer, like that's not nothing. Like, either you can get a starter or a rotation guy with that 10th pick. You can trade that 10th pick for a starter or a rotation, starter or rotation guy. And then they can trade that other pick for another guy, or they can combine them for like a third guy if they really want like someone really good. So like, they can't come into next season, rolling out the Kyrie, Luka, Bullock, Maxey, and then maybe one of like, they need to get off this core of THJ and Bullock and Maxey. It's going to be hard for them to do, but like they need to if like I had to set a goal for them, I would think they need to acquire 2 starting level players that are new to the team that can start.
And that gives us kind of a soft transition to talk about, we were going to talk last night, but then we just decided not to. It's the lovely part about the off season. We really appreciate everybody who is here. Go ahead and like the live stream, guys. And if you are new, please subscribe. Please tell your friends. We're inching closer to 1,000 subs. We're at just under 900. If we could somehow get to 900 tonight, that would be incredible. Let's see here. So that gives us kind of a, you wrote a column that had been rattling around in your head. I'm going to post it in the chat. If anyone hasn't read it, you should go do so. If you're listening on the podcast the next day, again, go do so. Please, let's talk about your column a little bit, because there's a lot there. I had a good time editing this. It's taken apart the Mavericks bit by bit. And before you start, I do want to make note. We've got some really wonderful and funny comments on the YouTube channel lately. One guy in particular, I really appreciate. He listened to it later, and I could tell he was like leaving comments as he was listening to us. One thing that he emphasized over and over, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was beating the Mavericks to death, sort of, and Luka, really, for it's like Luka being in shape, Luka not whining, Luka doing better in the things that are within his control, really, really solves a lot of their problems. So I wanted to, before you talk about your column, I wanted to note, first of all, that I do agree with that. But I also think once you if you look at what the Mavericks have done with the other pieces for the past 3 to 4 years, we've gotten so used to accepting their mediocrity. And I like reading your column. It's like, I knew this stuff, but then you see it all in one place and it's like, oh my God. So anyways, I'll let you take the floor.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that it's not a new idea, and I wrote something similar, I think, when they lost to the Clippers in 2021, Rick's last season. And it's been easy to kind of beat this dead horse because the roster hasn't changed. Like, the problem has persisted since Luke has been drafted. And again, it's basically this idea that they have just been attached to this 2019 core of dudes that aren't good enough. And, the thing that really, I think, made it apparent this season was, they traded Dorian and they traded Spencer. And there was some hand-wringing about losing, especially Dorian. And I understand that from, like, the off-the-court stuff and the emotional stuff and leadership and that kind of, and, like, Luka's buddy. Like, that's the stuff I don't want to argue. Like, I can't argue that. Like, that's obviously something that matters. And it's not quantifiable, so it's tough for me to put a value on that other than it obviously mattered. But in terms of just like the basketball on the floor, like those two guys, as soon as they left the Mavs, they did nothing. I mean, Dorian's shooting plummeted to the low 30s. He was shooting like 43% on twos. He was averaging like 6 or 7 points a game. Dinwiddie's 3-point shooting went from 40% to 29%.
That's incredible.
And his, it just goes to show that, like you said, we didn't, it's hard to realize it because like Luka just covers up so much, and his ability to be like the best 3-point shot creator in the game, he's able to turn bad and mediocre shooters into good and great ones. And you kind of forget about, like, you see Dorian shoot 38% since Luka's been a major starter from 3, and you're like, oh, that's great, because that is a good number. And then you have to kind of rewind it and think, oh, wait, that's 38% on the most wide open shots in the NBA.
Like, he got and it's not an exaggeration.
No,
guys.
That's according to NBA tracking data. I didn't have that in the column because I think I didn't want to bog it down too much. But if you look up NBA tracking data that judges open shots, like, the Mavericks role players are like at the top of that. Like, they crowd that list.
It was like Bullock and Dorian that had the most open threes. They were 2 of the top 3 guys. And so it's really difficult to, because we watch, like, look, all y'all, the folks that are in the chat that are watching the playoff games, y'all are heroes because I need a little bit of a break from the NBA. But by and large, the casual fan is not watching other teams, and it's really something to see these stats. Like, obviously small sample size, but Spencer before coming to the Mavericks was a terrible 3-point shooter.
Yes,
he was like in the high 20s, low 30s, and he had a lot of volume because he was he's been in the league for quite some time. And then to see him rocket back down to 29% is truly crazy.
Yeah. It just goes to show like what the talent level the Mavericks have compared to other guys. And it's like the Mavericks have had this like mantra since Luke has been drafted to like, I've said this before, they kind of want a money ball in terms of like they want to find diamonds in the rough that they don't have to pay and save their money for stars like a Kyrie. And he's the first one they finally got. And they struck out on everyone else. And in their mind, it's like, I'm not going to pay a lot of money for this role player when we can find this guy who can kind of do it just as well because we have Luka. So why would I spend this much money on this really great shooter when I can spend a fourth of that on a Dorian or on a Reggie, and they're going to shoot a good percentage because we've got Luka? And the answer to that is, well, you're just like, you can only carry that so far because of the NBA. You can't escape the talent. Like, underdogs don't win in the NBA playoffs. This isn't March Madness.
No,
like 7 game to win 4 7-game series, like the better team almost always has to come out on top. Like, I don't know what the stat is, but like, when was the last time a team that was outside of the top 4 in their conference won an NBA title? Or
it is like the Mavericks in 2011 were one of the last one. It's really nuts. It's why I don't understand why more teams don't care about the regular season, because it's just, you see this over the course of time. And
sorry, go ahead.
Well, in chat, Angel says, he said the Luka ends up taking a lot of the heat because of his body language and because he's, just so demonstrative, but he is why the Mavericks have been so competitive in the first place. And I think that's an important thing to make, a distinction to make, because Luka can come into camp in shape and be the best player he can possibly be. And the Mavericks might win 4 more games, maybe, with the roster, maybe, and maybe not even that. Like, they have to make wholesale changes. And the Dallas Mavericks as an organization have been so intent on marketing that they know what they're doing that it becomes, not to be too ridiculous, but it's sort of Orwellian in the sense of where you just get hit up from every angle about how smart they are. And then at a certain point, you're like, yeah, sure. Yeah, they know what they're doing. This is great. Whereas the reality has been, they have been blessed with 2 of the best superstars of the in NBA history. Like, just being quite candid about it. And superstars cover up a lot of your challenges, but then that means you have to figure out the margins better. The Mavericks did that in 2011. They got lucky. They tinkered and tinkered and tinkered. And that's what doesn't make sense about this, the roster from 2019, basically March of 2019 on, has been just so similar. And they've sort of painted themselves into a corner. Like, I don't see what they do here. Like, I'm going to be frustrated from a fan sense, but I also have no idea what they can do differently.
Yeah, I don't know. And like, I kind of there's 2 main things in the column. It's like, one, like every like athleticism based stat, they were awful. They were like in the bottom third of the league. They were 22nd in forcing turnovers, 29th in steals per game, 26th in steal rate, 29th in deflections per game, 28th in blocks per game, 27th in block rate, allowed opponents to shoot 29%, they allowed opponents to have a 29% free throw rate. That was 27th. They were last in offensive rebound rate. Like, and these are all things like, if you have better athletes, you're usually better at. And it's just like, they're just such a floor bound team that almost every other team they matched up with could run faster and jump higher. And it's like, that's why they could only win games when they outshot their teams from 3 by a bunch, because they were a one-trick pony. That was it. And it's like Dwight Powell is 9th all time in Mavericks franchise history in games played. Dorian was 14th, and if he didn't get traded and finished his contract, he would be in the top 10. Maxey is in like the top 20, and if he finishes his 3 years here, he'll be near 10. Tim Hardaway Jr. has been here 4.5 seasons. He's going to be in the top 15 if he finishes his contract. And like, I can't imagine. And you look at all the other names on that list, and it's like all the guys from the finals teams, from the championship team, and then all the guys from the 2000s, the mid 2000s era, where they went to the finals and they won 67 games in 2007. And then the rest of it is guys from the late 80s teams that went to the Western Conference Finals, and they were a really good team too. And it's like, it's like, how can the next set be guys like they've missed the playoffs twice with Luka Doncic on the roster? First one is okay, he was rookie year, but still, that's twice in 5 years. And then the other two out of the other 3, they lost in the first round. And it's like, why are they so attached to this core? It just drives me nuts. So like, I wonder, I don't think Nico or Kid are attached like I think Rick and Donnie were beforehand. Of course, it goes back to Cuban. So, you talk about what can they do? Well, it's like Timmy, I think, rebuilt his trade value a little bit, enough to where I think maybe those teams that were offering him contracts when he was a free agent in 2021 might still be interested. Like, you can probably move off of Timmy. Maybe you can move off of Maxey. Like his deal is relatively cheap for theoretically a big that can shoot and defend, although he looked so bad after he came back from his hamstring injury, which is kind of understandable. You can let Dwight go. You don't have to bring him back. Even if it's a 1-year minimum deal. Like, I heard a lot of people were like you're not you're just being ridiculous if you think Dwight coming back on a 1-year minimum contract is bad. Like, I understand in a vacuum.
They'll start him.
Yes. You have to take away the safety blanket.
I wanted to rewind just for a moment,
because
in your list of no, this is great. This is what I wanted. I hope people understand just how bleak it is, and to kind of top it off. In Josh's list of stats, if you were to like list them out, the Mavericks there are 30 teams in the NBA. In 15 different stats, the Mavericks were bottom 5 of the ones. This is just the ones he listed. Bottom 5. So, to the point earlier, there's someone, I think it was Thomas in the chat, saying, Luka doing what he does is so frustrating and demoralizing to watch when things aren't going his way. I agree. It's a chicken and the egg discussion, though. What comes first, Luka pouting or the Mavs being absolute ass at all of these things? And not all the defense is on Luka. That's like, it's a team building thing. Like, some of the pace stuff is, okay. There's some of these stats you can look into them and be like, Luka plays a pretty significant point into this. And I would agree. But you just have to do better with better players. I mean, you go through these playoff teams in the first round. You guys are all watching this stuff tonight. I can tell from the chat. If you were to go look at it, let's say everything outside of maybe the 1-8 matchups on both sides, who outside of Kyrie and Luka Doncic would play significant minutes for any of these teams? Is there anyone that was on the Mavericks roster when they closed the year? The answer is no. That's not to say they don't have useful pieces, but for the better part of 4 years, Josh and I have been talking about how every single Maverick is playing 1 to 2 positions higher in the pecking order than what their talent actually would allow for. You wrote you talked about, like, this is, you skipped over a part, and I'm looking for it in the column because it's about Kyrie and how well he played in the relation to this. So where did that go? You said this is the Kyrie, like, where is this? Why can I not find this? It's your part about Kyrie, basically. If he would have played the entire season with the Mavericks.
I've got it. Do you want me to read it?
No, I found it. Okay. If Irving had played a full season in Dallas, he would have set a career high in true shooting percentage and a career low in turnover rate. A career high for Kyrie Irving, who's won an NBA championship as an all-star, 3-time all-NBA selection, would have had one of his most efficient statistical seasons. And then you end with this line where you say, This is what Doncic should be doing, amplifying great players to be their best instead of spinning hay into gold. And it's just, we know this, but it goes back to an element of what I've heard discussed about Cuban in particular, not necessarily the Mavericks, but Cuban in particular, is that he values the 1A player, the tier 1A, your Luka Doncic, your Giannis Antetokounmpo, your Nikola Jokic, your top 7 to top 10 NBA players. And then after that, really doesn't value players, doesn't value the second tier superstars, doesn't value your Harrison Barnes, your C tier players, whatever you want to rank these guys. It's bargain bin guys and it's superstars. And that's what I've been told Cuban values. And when you go look at the roster construction from when they got Luka, that seems to hold. And it's very
it's that stock market tech guru brain of like, why would I overpay? Like, I'm smart enough to get this for cheaper. Like, why would I pay $25 million a year for the third best player that can play defense and hit threes when I can, get a Dorian Finney-Smith, who's an undrafted free agent that can do the same thing? And it's like, it's not the same. It's just not the same. It's like it can only take you so far, because then you go against teams that have those talented players, that have an Aaron Gordon as their third best player, that have a Malcolm Brogdon coming off the bench, that have a Marcus Smart as like their fourth best player, that have Drew Holiday as the third best player, you could argue, in Milwaukee, whether it's Holiday or Chris Middleton is their third best player. Like, they would be one of the best Mavericks in the last 10 years if they were on this team. It's just, you look at the top 4 in each conference, and it's just no comparison. Like, you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, and their 4 best players are Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley. And it's like, okay, Luka, Kyrie, great. And then it's like Mobley and Jared Allen would be like the 2 most talented guys the Mavericks have had outside of like Luka and Kyrie. And it's just, it's just tough. And that's why I really want them to, it's kind of why I want them to keep the 10th pick, because I just really want youth and athleticism, and I want them to build a core around Luka. I'm really scared they're going to trade it for someone who's like 33, but that's another conversation down the road.
Yep, which we'll get to. We have a long, summer. This is the first time, we've kind of been in this position since Luka's rookie year. Yep. And you and I weren't podcasting during Luka's rookie year like we were now. Okay, well, this has been a productive use of 40 minutes. Thanks for the folks who are in here. I think kind of schedule wise, you and I are going to aim to talk 1 time a week minimum, maybe more depending on what's happening. We have a lot of regular content coming up. Mavs Moneyball. We'll frankly talk about some of that in the broader conversations here. I'm going to be hosting a live show. I think the next one I'm going to do is Thursday night. I don't know if I'm going to do it early or late. Some listener, viewer feedback would be appreciated in that regard, because I can kind of do either. I can do, 7, 8 o'clock at night. I can do 10, 11 o'clock at night. It really depends. I think as the off season goes on, I'll probably try to do the occasional Friday live show during lunch, like I used to do a couple summers ago. But I'm not, I don't want to oversaturate. I've been, I was listening to Locked On Mavs today, and he had on a guy that I want us to talk to at one point, Barlow, talking draft stuff. And I can't emotionally attach myself to the draft just yet. I'm going to have to, because we run a content site, but it's really something. We kind of have a pre and post lottery, fork in the road plan and discussion. So we'll be figuring out what we're going to do from there. We'll probably, like, the off-season content plan is to cook straight on through free agency and summer league. And then after summer league, which is mid-July, probably take a more significant chunk of time away, even though I say that and I'll just be unable. Maybe we'll use the summer to do some talk about some guys, because like I really want to talk about like Josh Howard. Just to, it's been in my head lately.
How awesome would Josh Howard, like prime Josh Howard, be next to Luka?
Man, I love it. I love it. And you guys in the chat, I really appreciate you hanging out here. Sorry that we bumped some stuff around. Be looking, lottery's May 16th. Thanks, Joe. That's rough. That's 30-ish day, under 30 days. I'm pretty sure. Just let me go look at the calendar here. I looked at this the other day. Okay, that's a Tuesday. That's good. I can do Tuesday. If it was on, I thought I had some worry that I wasn't going to be able to see the lottery because like my kid has baseball in the evenings. Like that'd be just classic. I wouldn't be able to scream on the internet. Maybe we'll do a live show during the lottery. So we got a lot of stuff that we're kind of thinking about, but compared to some of our peers in the Mavs community, we all have sort of different incentives to do this sort of work. And Josh and I just sort of need a break, I think, after the last couple of years. I guess we didn't realize how much we've been doing stuff until we're like, oh, yeah, we started March of 2020 and just kind of went straight on through. You got anything before we get out of here?
I think that's about it. Just looking forward to getting to that draft lottery because Lord knows what we're going to do if the ping pong balls don't bounce the Mavs' way. And that 20% kicks in, but maybe I shouldn't even put that out into the.
I love it, and I'm not like mentally prepared to go there, but I do like it. David Sanchez says, "Am I the only person that wants Brandon Miller more than anyone else in the draft?" David, I have an all problematic Mavs team that I've thrown out into the universe that includes like the Mavericks going and also signing the Charlotte Hornet that lost out on his like nearly $100 million deal because of his abuse allegations. Just all sorts of problematic Mavs. It'd be just a riot to cover. All right, this has been a great time. Please go smash that subscribe button. Tell your friends. We like doing these. I know that YouTube is not for everybody. At least that's how I feel because I'm 1,000 years old. But I'm enjoying this. And look for us at some point next week. And then look for me at some point on Thursday. Send me messages for what you prefer, and I will try to accommodate to the people who are the most participatory. Everybody have a great rest of the week, and we will talk soon. Go Mavs.